We are back, and we're going to continue our conversation about the FBI probe into the Donovan campaign finances. We just a few moments ago started talking about the timing of it, how quick it was, and the governor has spoken out, reaching back into his experience as a prosecutor and making a comment about why he thinks it is.
There's two possible explanations, I suppose, for how fast this thing developed. One is that there was an ongoing investigation into other matters, and somehow this came across someone's bow. The other way is it just came across someone's bow, and they recognized an opportunity to investigate.
So that's, as you were saying, the million-dollar question is, everyone wants to know, I mean, how did they get tipped off? Why did they start looking into it? And is that something that we will eventually? I guess we will eventually know that.
Eventually it will come out, whether in a court case or a pleading. It should, come to the forefront. Because, again, a corruption case, again, the FBI just doesn't start a corruption case. You need a predicate. You need some type of a very strong allegation or an actual event to open it, because you have to go through the Department of Justice to get those opened. And so something will come out, and there's so many different ways that the cases come to the forefront. One could be a victim had stepped forward. It could be another investigation. It could be something that's just as a spin-off. So there's a lot of conjecture and not a lot of information out there right now.
So as you're looking at this as a former candidate, you're thinking what?
I'm thinking how difficult, again, Matt touched on the fundraising, because that is imperative. That's the metric right now that people are looking at for every candidate. And, if you're making those telephone calls and you're meeting people, it's a tough sell if that is their introduction to you.
How often were you briefed when you were running? How often were you briefed on how much money was coming in and the bigger donors?
I'd say daily you're briefed. You're looking at your numbers, and if the $2,500 donors are significant donors. They're maximum for that period of time, and so it's important to you, and you'll want to know who they are, and you'll reach out for them in the hopes that they'll introduce you to other maximum donors. And so it's, I would say it's on a daily basis.
I think in the Donovan case, there is some kind of plausibility to the statement that he's made that he is not aware of all his donors. Taking a look at who his donor base really is, it's labor. And as apparently has emerged here, a well-known labor leader in the state apparently approached the campaign and said that he could be helpful in raising money. This is not an unusual situation to have senior labor leaders approach you and say, we can raise some money for you. So the fact that he did not specifically know those individual donors, once again, that would not be unusual in this context.
The nature of Donovan's fundraising, though, is double-edged. Absolutely, most of his money is small dollar, a lot of labor money. But that can argue the other way, that he should have been perhaps especially aware of the larger checks. This is a campaign that's received fewer than 50 $2,500 checks. So that's something that will probably come up with Mr. Donovan in debates. Why didn't you know? Why, when it came time to do the routine thank you, didn't you ask, geez, who is this guy? Who is this guy from Waterbury who's cutting me a check for $2,500? I've never heard of him.
There are going to be a lot of questions. I do think it's important to note that nobody's accused the Speaker of doing anything. And I think because of the calendar, because of the difficulty with fundraising, and because the primary is coming up so soon, as a matter of fairness, the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney should quickly evaluate the situation, and perhaps they should say something. If the Speaker is not a target, if they're not planning to indict him, I think maybe they should say so sooner rather than later.
And you were mentioning other instances in which they've done just that.
Yeah, you do see it sometimes. The former governor of New Mexico got a letter from the Department of Justice saying that, and as Mike said, often the Department of Justice is sensitive to elections issues and to the potential for disrupting elections. And this seems like a case where if the Speaker is not going to be accused of anything, the government should probably say it.
In your experience, how fast can that happen? In other words, we just had a very, very recent arrest. For them, a week later, 2 weeks later, even a month later, to say Donovan has nothing to do with it. Would that not be quick compared to past cases that you're aware of?
It would be quick. We don't know how long the investigation's been going on for before all of this happened. number one. And number two, it could be quick, but normally what they'll say is that somebody's not accused of anything at a particular time. They can always revisit things as they go along.
I think one of the areas that also hasn't really been covered as much in the media is the fact that the House Republicans also received checks. And there hasn't been a lot of questions raised about what is the connection between this legislation that's been discussed, the Roll Your Own legislation, and the House Republicans? Or do we know if the Senate Republicans and the Senate Democrats may have also received checks?
Well, and that was my story then about the House Republicans. And Larry Cafaro, the House Minority Leader, said it was the FBI who informed him that they had reason to believe that some of their sting money ended up in 3 PACs that are controlled by the House minority. But he said that they would not go into further details. He said they informed him that he is not a target, nor is his staff a target. I think we have to take him at face value, because that would be a very stupid thing to say publicly if you're going to be contradicted by a U.S. attorney at some point. But it just raises more questions. It's, you know, I have another source who said it was Ray Susi, the same union go-between, who approached Cafaro and asked, where is it that a check should be sent for these PACs? And that apparently is how Larry identified the checks to return, because it was all timing. He said the FBI did not identify specific donors or specific checks. But again, there is this tie to the roll your own issue. It really is a mystery that we don't have a lot of plot terms.
Well, and it makes it even more interesting is that apparently the money that's been identified so far has all been federal money. And there hasn't been an allegation that there's a slew of other checks that have come through as part of kind of a large effort by many folks to send this money and influence the legislation.
Maybe these two could say, what do you need to do? What kind of approval do you need to get, whether it's Main Justice or the U.S. Attorney's Office, before an FBI agent basically helps somebody commit a crime?
Again, this is something that's vetted right through the U.S. Attorney's Office. You know, the FBI is working very closely with the U.S. Attorney's Office, with the prosecutor in this. And for something like that, because in this case it appears from the affidavit that there was an undercover FBI agent introduced in as well. And that would have to come from our FBI headquarters, as well as in a corruption case from the Department of Justice as well.